morning unfolded with the kind of precision Andrew Wallace expected from the world. The city was awake but not yet chaotic, wrapped in a calm hum of engines and muted footsteps. The air had that pale chill of early autumn, brushing against glass towers that reflected the dull silver of a clouded sky. Inside his penthouse, Andrew's coffee machine hissed exactly at 6:30 a.m. His newsfeed rolled through the markets in quiet green arrows, and his suit, a tailored charcoal gray, waited on the hanger as if it too understood the rhythm of his days. He liked order. He liked control. The world made sense when it stayed in line. His meetings were back-to-back, investors at 9, media at 11, a charity gala that evening. His assistant had sent the day's itinerary to his phone at precisely 6:45, and by 7 crew, Andrew was stepping into the elevator that would carry him from the top floor of his immaculate world to the polished chaos below. The building lobby smelled faintly of cedar and money. The valet already had his car waiting, an obsidian sedan so spotless it seemed to reject dust. He checked his reflection in the tinted window before sliding into the seat. Everything was as it should be, until he noticed the empty slot in the cup holder where his water bottle usually sat. For a man like Andrew Wallace, that was enough to feel like a flaw. He could have called his assistant. He could have ignored it, but something about the missing bottle tugged at him, a single grain of disorder he couldn't allow. So he parked by the corner grocery, a tiny, dim place pressed between a bakery and a newsstand, the kind of store he hadn't stepped into in years. A bell above the door chimed as he entered. The air inside was cool, faintly metallic from the hum of old refrigerators. Shelves stood in narrow rows lined with cans and faded price tags. Somewhere in the back, a young clerk was restocking eggs, humming softly. Andrew moved with purpose, his steps measured, eyes flicking to his watch as if time itself waited for him to return. But when he turned down the dairy aisle, something made him stop. 2 small figures stood near the bottom shelf, so small he almost missed them. They couldn't have been older than 6. Their clothes were worn, shoes scuffed, hair tied back with thin rubber bands that looked ready to snap. One wore a faded pink t-shirt, the other a pale blue one that hung loose around her shoulders. He watched as the girl in pink looked over her shoulder, once, twice, then reached for a carton of milk. She hesitated, bit her lip, and slid it carefully under her shirt. The other, the one in blue, did the same with a small pack of cookies. Their movements were clumsy but quiet, practiced in the way of children who had learned fear too early. Andrew's throat tightened. He should have turned away, called the clerk, done the rational thing. But something in the fragile defiance of those tiny hands stopped him. He stepped closer, his voice low and steady. "Are you stealing?" Both girls froze. The carton of milk slipped a little beneath the pink shirt, and the one in blue grabbed her sister's hand, holding on so tightly their knuckles turned white. They turned toward him together, wide-eyed and trembling. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. The hum of the refrigerators filled the silence. Then the girl in pink whispered, "Please don't call 911. Her voice cracked on the last word. "We're just really hungry." Andrew felt something shift inside him, something small and sharp. He looked at their faces, pale, frightened, smudged with dirt, and realized they weren't defiant at all. They were desperate. The store around him seemed to fade, replaced by the sound of his own heartbeat and the memory of another time. His mother's tired hands, her voice saying, "We'll be fine, Andy. Just one more week." He swallowed hard, the world tilting ever so slightly. For once he didn't know what to say, what the right move was. The man who negotiated billion-dollar deals couldn't summon a single line of protocol. He crouched so he could meet their eyes, his voice gentler now. "Hey," he said quietly. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The girl in blue blinked up at him, still gripping her sister's hand. "We didn't mean to be bad," she whispered. "We just don't have food at home." Andrew stared at them, 2 small strangers in a forgotten grocery aisle, and felt the cold precision of his morning unravel. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about time or reputation or profit. He was thinking about hunger, and how 2 frightened little girls had just broken the hardest thing in the world to break, his heart. The hum of the refrigerators faded behind him as Andrew led the girls to the small cafe corner tucked inside the grocery store. It wasn't much, a few plastic tables, a humming coffee machine, and the dull flicker of fluorescent lights that cast everyone in the same washed-out color. The cashier, a teenage boy with earbuds in, barely glanced up when Andrew placed an order for 2 sandwiches, 2 juice boxes, and a hot chocolate. He set the food in front of them. For a few seconds, neither child moved. They sat still, rigid, their small hands folded tightly in their laps as if waiting for punishment. The younger one, the one in blue, darted a quick glance toward her sister, silently asking permission. The older girl gave a tiny nod, then hunger took over. They devoured the food like the world might take it back at any second, bites too large, breaths too short, crumbs falling across the table. The sound of their chewing filled the silence, loud and fragile all at once. Andrew sat across from them, watching, unsure what to feel. He'd seen desperation before, in boardrooms, in markets, in people clawing their way up the corporate ladder. But never like this. Never this small, never this human. He could feel his phone buzzing again in his pocket. A calendar alert, a call from his assistant, a meeting reminder. All of it seemed distant now, irrelevant in a way that almost frightened him. The older girl looked up at him mid-bite, her wary eyes studying his tailored suit, the expensive watch glinting under the harsh light. "Are you gonna tell the police?" she asked quietly. Andrew blinked. "No," he said after a moment, his voice softer than he intended. "I'm not calling anyone." The girl hesitated. People always say that. That single sentence, and simple, flat, but trembling at the edges, hit him harder than any accusation could. He realized then that she didn't just expect punishment. She expected betrayal. "What's your name?" he asked. "Ela," she said finally, nodding toward her sister. "That's Emma." Emma peeked up, her cheeks puffed with bread, and mumbled something like a greeting before taking another bite. Andrew almost smiled. Almost. But the weight in his chest wouldn't let him. "Where are your parents, Ela?" There was a pause. She looked down at the table, tracing the ring of condensation left by her juice box. "Our mom's in the hospital," she said quietly. "She got sick. She's not waking up." Andrew leaned forward slightly. "And your dad?" Ela shook her head. "He left when we were babies." The words fell like pebbles into a well, small but echoing deep. Andrew exhaled, steady and slow. He didn't know what to say, so he didn't say anything at all. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. Not to call the police, not to make notes or send messages, but to look up something he hadn't searched in years: the nearest hospitals. As his thumb hovered over the screen, he caught sight of his reflection in the dark glass of the phone. His face looked different, not tired, not angry, just lost. He remembered his own mother, the way she used to work night shifts in a diner, smiling through exhaustion, pretending things were fine when they weren't. She had been strong, too strong, until one night she wasn't. He'd been 12 when he'd found her collapsed on the kitchen floor, and he had promised himself that day never to need anyone again. And yet here he was, decades later, watching 2 small girls fight to survive the same kind of silence that had swallowed him as a boy. When the girls finished eating, Emma yawned and leaned against her sister's shoulder. Ela brushed crumbs from her lap, her eyes still locked on Andrew, uncertain whether to trust him. "Do you have anyone else? Any relatives?" he asked gently. "No," Ela said. "Just us." He stood then, slowly, deliberately, as if one wrong move might shatter their fragile courage. "Come with me," he said. Ela frowned, suspicious. "Why?" "Because," Andrew said, meeting her gaze, "you shouldn't have to steal to eat." They followed him out into the fading morning light. The city had come fully alive now. Horns, voices, footsteps echoing off glass. Andrew opened the rear door of his sleek black SUV and watched as the girls climbed in, their tiny figures swallowed by leather seats far too big for them. As he pulled into traffic, the girls sat silently in the back, pressed close together. In the rearview mirror, he saw Ela staring out the window with that same guarded expression, while Emma dozed, her small hand still clutching the half-empty juice box. He didn't know where he was going yet. His mind raced between logic and instinct, the part of him that dealt in numbers screaming to call social services, and another part, deeper and quieter, whispering, "Don't you dare let them go." He took a breath, the kind that hurts on the way in. For the first time in years, he was doing something that had no plan, no metric, no outcome, something entirely human. And as the city blurred past his windows, Andrew Wallace, millionaire CEO, master of order, felt something unfamiliar rising inside him. Fear, hope, and a sense that this morning, this small, accidental detour was about to change everything. The drive stretched on in uneasy silence. Rain had begun to tap gently against the windshield, soft but relentless, a whisper of gray over the city's steel edges. Andrew's hands rested tightly on the steering wheel, not from nerves but from the unfamiliar feeling of not knowing what came next. In the rearview mirror, the two girls sat close together, mirror images in smallness and silence. Ela, the older by minutes but wiser by miles, kept her chin lifted, eyes fixed on the blur of passing streets. Emma leaned against her shoulder, her thumb tucked between her lips, half asleep but not at peace. When Andrew finally spoke, his voice sounded strange to him, softer, almost careful. "Can you tell me where you live?" Ela hesitated before answering, her voice barely above a whisper. "Maple Court Apartments, the old building near the bus depot." He knew the area, a forgotten corner of the city where rent was cheap and hope was expensive. The road narrowed as they turned off the main street. The luxury car looked out of place here, gliding past flickering streetlights and crumbling facades. They pulled up to a brick building with paint peeling like old skin and windows patched with cardboard. A broken tricycle lay abandoned near the entrance, its red plastic faded to pink. Andrew parked and killed the engine. For a moment he didn't move. The girls sat still, waiting for permission. Finally he got out and opened their door, offering his hand. The air smelled of rain and rust. Ela didn't take his hand, but she climbed out, holding Emma's tightly. She led him up 2 flights of narrow stairs that creaked beneath their small feet. The hallway light flickered, on, off, on again, as if even the electricity was tired of trying. Their apartment door stuck when she turned the handle, opening only after a firm shove. Inside, the air was cool and too still. Andrew stepped into a space that told a story without words. The walls were bare except for a few children's drawings, suns, stick figures, a crooked house with 3 smiling faces. A small couch sat in the living room, covered neatly with a folded blanket. On the coffee table lay a cheap picture frame, a woman in scrubs with her arms around the twins, smiling with tired eyes. The kitchen was immaculate, not because it was cared for, but because there was almost nothing to use. The fridge door creaked open to reveal a half loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter, and an expired carton of milk. The silence in the room seemed to deepen as Andrew stood there, staring into that empty refrigerator. Behind him, Ella said quietly, "I tried to clean before we left. I thought if Mommy woke up and came home, she'd be happy to see it nice." Her words broke something in him, not dramatically, but like a small, sharp fracture that couldn't be undone. He turned toward her. "You've been here alone since she went to the hospital?" Ela nodded. 3 nights. "And no one came? No neighbors? No friends?" She shook her head. "Mommy's friend, Miss Carla, lives in the next building, but she works nights. We didn't want to bother her." Emma tugged on her sister's sleeve. "We drank water from the tap," she mumbled like a confession. "And cereal dust. The crumbs at the bottom." Andrew closed his eyes for a moment. The precision of his world, the stock tickers, the sleek meetings, the luxury he had crafted like armor, suddenly felt obscene. He had spent millions on art that meant nothing, and here were 2 children rationing crumbs in the dark. He turned back to the table. Beside the photograph was a small pile of papers, medical forms from the hospital. Patient Sharon Reeves, age 34, condition, hemorrhagic stroke, status, comatose. There was a hospital bracelet resting on top, coiled like a ghost of the woman who had worn it. Andrew stared at the name until it blurred. Sharon Reeves. He didn't know her, but somehow her struggle filled the room like a presence. He sank onto the couch, elbows resting on his knees. Head bowed. He had no plan. For a man who had built his life on plans, that realization should have terrified him. But what he felt instead was clarity. Quiet and absolute. Ela stood near the doorway watching him. "Are you mad at us?" she asked. He lifted his head slowly. "Mad? No." His voice was hoarse. "I'm sorry. For what?" "For not being here sooner." She frowned, confused, as though she didn't understand how a stranger could apologize for something he didn't cause. Andrew rose and walked to the window. Outside, the rain had turned heavier, streaking the glass like tears. The city lights blurred into a haze of golden gray. Somewhere beyond those streets, his office waited. His boardroom buzzed, his reputation ticked like a metronome. But none of it mattered anymore. He turned back to the girls. "Pack a few things," he said gently. "Clothes, anything important? You're not staying here tonight." Emma's eyes widened. "Are we in trouble?" "No." He knelt to her height. "You're safe now. I promise." They didn't move at first, as if afraid to believe him. Then Illa nodded once, leading her sister into the small bedroom. Andrew stood alone in the living room, staring again at the photo on the table. The smiling woman in scrubs. He reached out and turned the frame upright where it had tilted, his reflection overlapping hers for an instant in the glass. He whispered under his breath, not sure who he was speaking to. "I'll take care of them." When the girls came back out, each clutching a worn backpack, he guided them toward the door. The hallway outside seemed darker now, but the air carried a different kind of silence, the kind that comes when something changes forever. As he locked the door behind them, he didn't realize that the simple turn of that handle had already closed one life and opened another. Downstairs, rain pooled on the pavement, and the reflection of the neon sign outside the store shimmered like a second world, one where three strangers were no longer strangers at all. And as Andrew led the girls into the night, he felt the faintest flicker of something he hadn't felt in years. Not pride, not success, purpose. Rain chased them all the way to the hills beyond the city. Andrew's house, more museum than home, sat in a pocket of glass and cedar, its lights automatic, its air faintly perfumed with nothing in particular. When the car doors shut, the sound echoed off the stone like something uninvited. The twins hesitated in the doorway, clutching their backpacks. A motion sensor brought the foyer to life. White walls, gleaming floors, art lit by invisible bulbs. Emma's whisper broke the hush. "It's so clean." Illa's small hand tightened on hers. "Don't touch anything." Andrew felt the comment pierce deeper than it should have. "You can touch whatever you like," he said, forcing a smile. It's just a house, but it wasn't just a house. It was an extension of him. Precise, curated, sealed off from the ordinary. Now 2 children in wet sneakers left prints across the marble. Something in him twitched at the sight, and he hated himself for noticing. He led them to the guest wing. "You can stay here tonight," he said. "There's a bathroom through that door, and I'll find you something to eat." While the girls explored the room with cautious eyes, Andrew walked back to the kitchen. He didn't know where to start. His refrigerator held sparkling water, imported cheeses, and the kind of produce that never actually got eaten. He made peanut butter sandwiches badly. The smell took him somewhere he hadn't been in decades. A rented apartment. His mother humming over toast because there wasn't time for anything else. When he returned, the girls were sitting on the bed side by side, as if they didn't quite believe they were allowed to sit. They ate quietly. Emma's feet didn't reach the floor. Illa murmured a thank you without looking up. Andrew retreated to his study once they were settled. The house seemed louder than usual. The creak of pipes, the rain ticking against the windows, his own thoughts looping in circles. He opened his laptop, meaning to catch up on messages. Instead, he stared at the unread list piling up. Victor, 9 p.m. status meeting? For urgent. Rumor circulating about CEO's mystery children. Avery, assistant. Are you all right? You missed everything today. Should I be worried? He closed the laptop, too late. Someone had seen him leave the grocery store with the girls. In his world, perception was everything. Gossip could ruin a quarter's worth of negotiation. The thought should have made him furious. It didn't. It made him afraid for the children, not for himself. A soft knock pulled him out of it. Avery's voice came through the intercom by the gate. She must have driven over from the office. "Sir, I brought the contract files you asked for this morning." Her tone wavered. She'd clearly heard whispers. He opened the door. She blinked at the sight of him. Tie gone, sleeves rolled, the picture of a man unguarded. "I didn't ask for any files," he said. "I know, people are talking." "You left with kids?" "Reporters have been calling." "Should I prepare a statement?" He met her eyes. "No statement. Not one word until I say otherwise." "Then at least tell me it's not true." He didn't answer. The silence did. Avery's expression softened from confusion to something like disbelief. "Andrew, what are you doing?" "I'm doing what's right," he said. and closed the door gently before she could press further. When he returned to the guest room, the girls were asleep, Emma curled under the duvet, Ela still half awake, staring at the ceiling. "Do you have nightmares?" she asked suddenly. "Sometimes," he admitted. "Mom says if you talk before you sleep, they don't come." "What should we talk about?" "Tomorrow." He sat on the edge of the bed, surprised by how small the room felt now that she was in it. "Tomorrow we'll visit your mom. We'll make sure she knows you're safe." Ela nodded once and closed her eyes. Down the hall, the house adjusted to its new occupants. A forgotten doll rolled off a suitcase and landed on the floor. The security cameras blinked in the corners, recording nothing unusual. Yet Andrew felt the weight of unseen eyes. The board, the press, the world he had built out of control. In the kitchen, he poured a glass of water and looked at his reflection in the window. Outside, dawn was smudging the horizon. He realized that for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about quarterly returns or headlines. He was thinking about two little girls asleep in his guest room and how easily the truth of a life could be rewritten in a single day. Upstairs, Ela shifted in her sleep. The motion sensor light flicked on, flooding the hallway with soft gold. The house, once immaculate, was no longer empty, and Andrew Wallace, who had spent a lifetime avoiding mess, understood that he had just invited in the kind that would change everything. By sunrise, the illusion of control was already slipping. The first email arrived before breakfast. "Need statement on rumor. Confirm or deny." The subject line was from public relations, flagged red. Beneath it came another from the company's board chair, blunt without greeting. "Why were you photographed leaving a grocery store with two minors last night?" Andrew stared at the screen, motionless. Outside, the world was still gray and half asleep, but the headlines were already writing themselves. He could see them: billionaire CEO's mystery children, secret family, or scandal. The kind of story that thrived on absence, on silence. He shut the laptop. Upstairs, the faint creak of footsteps reminded him that silence was no longer a luxury. The girls were awake. When he entered the kitchen, Emma was sitting at the table, legs swinging beneath the chair, a piece of toast untouched in her hands. Ela stood beside the counter, defensive even in stillness, as if ready to protect her sister from whatever came next. "I made pancakes," Andrew said, realizing too late how strange that sounded coming from him. His chef hadn't arrived yet. He'd dismissed the staff for the morning. The air smelled of burned batter and coffee, but Emma's face lit up anyway. "They look funny," she giggled. "They taste better than they look," he replied. Ela didn't smile. "Are we in trouble?" she asked quietly. The question cut deeper than any board inquiry ever had. "No," Andrew said. "You're not in trouble, but things might be a little complicated today." "Because of us?" she asked. He didn't answer. Her eyes dropped. After breakfast, he retreated to his study, phone pressed to his ear as his assistant's voice filled the line, tight with urgency. "Andrew, the PR team's going crazy. Someone leaked that photo. People are speculating. Investors are nervous. The morning shows are calling you the reclusive billionaire with a secret family." He could almost hear the ticking of the headlines forming, the boardroom whispers multiplying. "Let them call," he said. "That's not an option," Avery insisted. "They think you've lost control. You missed the investor meeting. The stock already dipped 2 points. Then let it dip." A long silence. "What's going on, Andrew?" "Who are those kids?" He hesitated. "They're just two girls who needed help." Avery exhaled, a sound between disbelief and fear. "You can't save the world, Andrew." "Maybe not," he said, "but I can save two of them." He ended the call before she could respond. The hospital was only 20 minutes away, but every minute of that drive felt like crossing a line that couldn't be uncrossed. He hadn't even told the girls yet that he was going. He just needed to see their mother, to know if there was still a chance to fix what had broken before he'd ever entered their lives. The building loomed like a weary guardian, concrete streaked with years of weather and grief. Inside, the air was heavy with disinfectant and whispers. At the reception desk, Andrew gave Sharon Reeves his name. The nurse glanced at him, recognition flickering in her eyes. "You're the man who called about the girls," she said softly. "They're safe?" He nodded. "Good," she said. "She's in room 214. She hasn't woken up." The hallway to 214 was lined with flowers that weren't his. cards written in hopeful hands. He paused outside the door before pushing it open. The woman in the bed was smaller than he expected. Tubes trailed from her arms, her face pale, her hair tangled against the pillow. The monitor beside her pulsed with steady, unyielding rhythm. Andrew sat down in the chair beside her. For a long while he said nothing. Then softly, "Your girls are all right? They're with me." The words felt strange on his tongue, like a promise he wasn't sure he had the right to make. He didn't know this woman, not really, yet her absence had rearranged his entire life overnight. A nurse entered quietly to check the monitors. She glanced at him, recognizing the expression she'd seen on too many visitors. Guilt and tenderness twisted together. "She can probably hear you," the nurse said. "They usually can," Andrew nodded. "They said you got sick at work." The nurse paused, lowering her voice. She was a nurse too. Double shifts overtime. She collapsed in the break room. No family listed, just the two girls. He looked at Sharon again. There were faint lines around her eyes, evidence of a life lived too hard and too quietly. "They've been alone for days," he murmured. The nurse hesitated. "You're the only one who's come." Something inside him shifted slow and heavy like a gear beginning to turn. "Then I'll keep coming," he said. When he left the hospital, the air outside felt sharper, the world suddenly too bright. His phone buzzed again. "Avery?" This time he answered. "You're trending," she said flatly. "It's everywhere." You holding the girl's hands, walking out of that grocery store. People are demanding a statement. Some are calling you a hero. Others think you've lost your mind. "Maybe I have," he said, and ended the call. By the time he returned home, the girls were waiting on the front steps. Emma ran to him first. Hila hung back, studying his face with that same cautious intensity. "Did you see Mommy?" she asked. "I did." "Is she going to wake up?" He knelt to meet her eyes. "I don't know. But she's not alone anymore, and neither are you." For a moment, the three of them stood in silence, the house looming behind them like a witness. Andrew could almost feel the invisible world pressing in. The reporters, the shareholders, the judgment waiting on his doorstep. But beneath it all, something else stirred, a quiet certainty that the man who'd walked into that grocery store had not come out the same. He opened the door. "Come on," he said softly. "Let's go inside." As they stepped in, the cameras outside clicked faintly through the rain. The story was no longer his to control, yet for the first time in his life, Andrew Wallace didn't care who was watching. The storm didn't come from the sky this time. It gathered on the lawn. By the second morning, reporters were parked along the narrow drive, their cameras flashing through the iron gates of Andrew Wallace's immaculate estate. Drones hovered like insects above the trees. Somewhere beyond the stone fence, a television anchor's voice carried on the wind. The billionaire CEO who vanished from a major deal now at the center of an unexpected story, a human story. Inside, Andrew moved through the house as if it had turned foreign overnight. Every motion sensor, every marble surface seemed to reflect the absurd contrast of his new reality. Two children's shoes by the door, a stuffed rabbit on his leather couch, a pink toothbrush beside his silver razor. He tried to work, God, he tried. The conference call glowed on his monitor, voices layered with static. "Andrew, the market's unstable. We can't defend you without a statement. You're damaging your own credibility." He stared past the screen to where Emma sat on the floor with a coloring book, humming softly, oblivious to the noise that used to define his world. Hila sat by the window watching the press vans beyond the fence with quiet suspicion. "Mr. Wallace," one of the investors said sharply. "Are you even listening?" He clicked the laptop shut. "Not today," he said, and walked out. In the hallway, the scent of cinnamon drifted from the kitchen, something he didn't recognize as his own doing. When he entered, the girls froze. They'd been experimenting with the toaster, a trail of crumbs and sugar spread across the counter. Emma's eyes widened. "We were hungry. I didn't mean to—" Andrew raised a hand. "It's fine. You're not mad?" Hila asked, doubtful. "I'm not mad," he said, though part of him was, not at them, but at how easily his perfect order had vanished under a handful of toast crumbs. He took a breath, stepped forward, and started helping. The girls stared as he poured orange juice into mismatched mugs. He had no idea what he was doing, but the sight of them eating eased something tight in his chest. "Ila," he said after a moment. "You're the older one, right?" "By 5 minutes," she answered proudly. "That's quite the responsibility." Her chin lifted slightly. "Mom says I have to look out for Emma, even when I'm scared." There was a tremor in her voice she didn't try to hide. Andrew didn't respond right away. He couldn't trust himself to. Instead, he busied his hands with clearing plates that didn't need clearing. Later that day, he caught his reflection in the glass walls of his office. The image startled him. His tie was gone. His shirt sleeves were rolled. There was a faint smear of peanut butter on his cuff, a detail so human it made him laugh softly, almost bitterly. The phone rang again. Avery. "Andrew," she said, voice tight. "The networks are outside. They're saying you're hiding the girls. They want to comment." "I'm not hiding them," he said. "I'm protecting them. You can't do that forever. This isn't sustainable. You're supposed to speak at the charity gala tonight. If you don't show up, the story only grows." He looked out the window. Emma was in the garden chasing a butterfly. Ila followed behind her, watchful, making sure her sister didn't run too far. "Then let it grow," he said quietly, and hung up. That evening, while the city prepared for the gala he was supposed to headline, Andrew sat cross-legged on the living room rug, surrounded by crayons and half-built puzzles. Emma leaned against his arm, humming to herself. Ila was reading aloud from a picture book, her voice gaining confidence with each word. The grandfather clock ticked in the corner, marking time he didn't care about anymore. He realized he hadn't thought about his company in hours. He hadn't thought about shareholders, stock values, or interviews. His world, his old worlding, had reduced itself to the rhythm of 2 small breaths beside him. When the doorbell rang, the spell broke. Avery stood on the porch, raincoat clinging to her shoulders, eyes wide with something between worry and disbelief. "You've got reporters circling like hawks," she said. "They're calling you irresponsible. You're jeopardizing the company." Andrew looked at her, exhausted but calm. "You came here to fire me?" "I came here to understand you," she said softly. "You've never missed a single appearance. You've never let emotion interfere with business. Now you're playing house with 2 strangers." "They're not strangers," he said. Avery hesitated, glancing past him into the house. Emma's laughter carried from the hallway. "You really care about them," she said quietly. "I didn't plan to," he admitted. "But somewhere between buying bottled water and making pancakes, I stopped seeing them as a problem to solve." Avery's expression softened. "This isn't you, Andrew." "Maybe it should have been," he replied. She left without another word. When the front door closed, Andrew stood in the silence that followed. His phone buzzed again, a dozen missed calls, 2 news alerts, 1 message from a board member warning him that his absence tonight would be interpreted as a resignation of authority. He looked at the screen for a long moment before setting it down on the counter. "Are we in trouble again?" Ila asked from the hallway, rubbing her eyes. He smiled faintly. "Not the kind that matters." He led them upstairs, tucking them into the guest room that no longer felt temporary. Emma drifted to sleep first, thumb in her mouth. Ila lay awake, her eyes following the soft light of the night lamp. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For staying." He reached out, smoothing her hair away from her face. "Always," he said. Downstairs, the storm of headlines raged across screens he no longer cared to watch. The cameras outside flashed through the windows, desperate to capture the image of a fallen titan. But inside, the house was quiet, warm, human. For the first time in years, Andrew Wallace didn't feel like a CEO defending a throne. He felt like a man rediscovering the weight of a promise, one that could no longer be measured in profits or prestige. And somewhere deep inside him, that terrified and comforted him all at once. Morning came without ceremony. The rain had stopped, but the air outside still carried that metallic chill that follows a storm. The reporters were already there, scattered like dark birds along the drive, tripods and microphones glinting under a bruised sky. Andrew watched them through the window while stirring his coffee, though he hadn't taken a sip. Upstairs, the house was awake in soft murmurs and laughter. Ila was teaching Emma how to fold paper cranes. Their voices carried faintly down the stairs, fragile, unguarded. He stood there listening, realizing how different the house sounded now. For years, silence had been his measure of success. Now it felt like absence. His phone buzzed again. A text from Avery. Board meeting in 2 hours. Media wants comment. Please don't make this worse. He put the phone face down. He knew what he had to do. At the hospital, the same nurse recognized him. You again, she said kindly. They told me you were on television this morning. I didn't watch. You should, she said with a small smile. People are saying you're not what they thought. He didn't ask what that meant. He only nodded and continued down the hall to Sharon's room. She was still there, still motionless. The sunlight fell across her face, giving the illusion of warmth she didn't yet feel. He sat beside her and laid a hand on the blanket. I've filed for temporary guardianship, he said quietly. It's just paperwork for now, but it'll keep them safe until you're ready. The monitor kept its steady rhythm. I don't know if that's what you'd want. I'm not even sure I deserve it. But they need someone who's not afraid to stay. He looked at her. This woman he barely knew, whose exhaustion and kindness he'd glimpsed only through the lives of her children. You raised them well, he said finally. You made them brave. For a long time he just sat there listening to the low hum of machines. Then, as if somewhere in that space between silence and breath, a finger twitched, just once. He froze, uncertain if it had truly happened. The nurse entered a moment later, checked the monitors, smiled faintly. Sometimes they move, she said. It's a good sign. He left the hospital not with hope exactly, but with something close enough to keep him standing. By the time he returned home, the press was waiting in full force. Dozens of cameras, questions thrown like stones. Mr. Wallace, are you the girl's legal guardian? Is it true you're leaving your company? Are you hiding their mother's condition? The security gate clicked open at his gesture. Avery was there, waiting by the steps, her expression unreadable. You don't have to do this, she said under her breath. One statement from legal and this all goes away. You can disappear until it blows over. He shook his head. No more disappearing. She stepped aside as he walked toward the cluster of microphones. The girls were watching from the upstairs window, their faces pale and curious behind the glass. He raised his eyes to them once in a quiet reassurance before turning to the crowd. The noise fell into uneasy silence. I'm not here to make a statement, he began. I'm here to tell you the truth. Dozens of cameras clicked in unison. Last week I found 2 children in a grocery store trying to steal food, he continued, voice steady. They were hungry and they were alone. I chose not to walk away. I chose not to treat them like a problem to be managed. And if that choice cost me my reputation or my company, so be it. Someone called out, Are you admitting you took them home? Yes, he said simply. I took them home because they had nowhere else to go. Another shouted, Why you, Mr. Wallace? Why get involved? He hesitated only a moment. Because I remembered what it felt like to need someone and have nobody show up. The words hung in the air longer than he expected. Then slowly the questions died away. The reporters kept filming, but the tone had changed. No longer accusation, but something quieter, almost human. He didn't wait for more. He turned back toward the house. Avery caught his arm as he passed. You just detonated your public image, she said softly. He smiled faintly. Maybe it's about time. Inside, Illa and Emma were waiting at the top of the stairs. You talked to them, Emma said. I did. Did they believe you? Illa asked. Maybe, he said. Maybe they don't need to. He crouched so he was eye level with them. We're going to be okay for now. And your mom? She might wake up soon. Emma's eyes brightened. Illa looked at him for a long time, as if trying to see whether he believed his own words. Whatever she saw there must have been enough, because she nodded and reached for his hand. The sun broke through the clouds then, spilling across the floor in long, golden lines. The house, once silent and sterile, glowed like something alive. Andrew exhaled slowly, the first unmeasured breath he'd taken in years. Outside, the press murmured. Inside, the clock ticked on, steady and indifferent. He didn't know what would happen next, whether the company would survive, whether Sharon would wake, whether the world would forgive him. For once, he didn't need to know. He looked at the girls, their small fingers wrapped around his, and realized the uncertainty didn't scare him anymore. It felt like living, and for Andrew Wallace, that was enough.